Hello and welcome to Maths with El Profe Lo. In this set of videos, we're talking about elementary number theory and we're looking at some exam style questions. Okay, so our first question, find all positive integers n for which n plus 1 divides n squared plus 1. Right? Now, this does not say to prove, right? Just asks us to find. Number 2 tells us to prove, but we can approach in a similar way. All right, so we're going to define our variable and we're going to say, hey, let n be a positive integer. Okay, now if n plus 1 divides n squared plus 1, right, the implication is that n squared plus 1 can be written as some multiple of n plus 1, where k needs to be a positive integer as well. So we can say, hey, k and n are going to be positive integers. Because if n plus 1 divides n squared plus 1, then I can write n squared plus 1 as some integer times n plus 1. Why does k need to be positive? Well, because n is positive, we know that n plus 1 is positive. N squared plus 1 must also be positive, so k has to be positive as well. Okay. Now, our next step in our solution to this involves trying to think of how we could write n squared plus 1 to have a factor of n plus 1. Okay. And so here's what we can do. We can say n squared plus 1 is equal to n squared minus 1 plus 2, which, using a difference of squares, can be factored as n minus 1 times n plus 1 plus 2. Okay, now if this is going to be true, right, and n plus 1 is going to be a factor of n squared plus 1, right, that n plus 1 is going to divide n squared plus 1, then here's what we must understand. This then indicates, right, therefore, right, 2 must be equal to some, let's use a q. 2 must be equal to some q times n plus 1 if this is going to be true, because I need to be able to write 2 in terms of n plus 1. Okay, so let's add this q. Also being a positive integer. Okay, so what do we have then? What we have is the following. This n squared plus 1 must be equivalent to 2 mod n plus 1. And we know that n plus 1 must divide 2, right? Well, the implication of n plus 1 dividing 2 is that n must equal -1, n must equal 0, or n must equal 1. Why? Because the only values that divide -2 are 0, 1, and 2. Right? Well, 0, 1, and 2 divide 2, which means n plus 1 has to be 0, or n plus 1 has to be 1, or n plus 1 has to be 2. Right? Well, n plus 1 is 0 if n is -1, n plus 1 is 1 if n is equal to 0. But it says we need to have positive integers, which tells us that this is an extraneous solution and that is an extraneous solution, and our only solution will be n equals 1. Right? So in other words, since n has to be a positive integer, n must equal 1. And that is our solution. Right? We'll look at the next problem in a subsequent video.